Welcome to Dreamland. This is Marla Fries, and part of my job as a host for this program is to introduce people who I've researched in the psychic spiritual world, who not only have stunning talents, but who radiate tremendous integrity. My guest today vibrates with sincerity and compassion in a way that no other well-known psychic does, in my opinion. She's world-renowned as an author, vibrational healer, and sixth sensory spiritual teacher. The wisdom in her many books and CDs are the tools that I recommend to my clients and to any of the listeners seeking psychic development and assistance. She's the psychic who I actually credit as putting me on my path in my own development some 25 years ago. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Sonia Choquette.
Well, thank you, Marla. It's such a pleasure to be able to talk with you and see all the wonderful things that are being accomplished as a result of our first encounter.
I know. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is.
When I sat in your living room, this was back in the early 80s, I was stunned by what you were able to tell me about my life. You talked about where I was going. You mentioned the city. You told me what would happen to me, which I would be brought to critical acclaim and then torn down, which it did happen. And I thought that when I left your house, I was not the same person. And I wasn't. It was as though you flipped a light switch on for me.
Well, that is my goal when I read for people, and I really like that you are able to articulate that, because what I attempt to achieve when I work with people is not to just convey information, but to change your vibration.
Right. Well, you did that with me, and because of what you and I did together and the door that you opened up, I feel that you really are the one who taught me how to change vibrational frequencies in other people, and I trust that is what I do for my clients, and I'm deeply grateful to you.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I always say I like to teach the teachers.
Well, that's basically, I just went on your website, which is just stunning. By the way, let's give our listeners what your website is right now.
It's very easy to remember. It's Trust Your Vibes, VIBES, www.trustyourvibes.com.
Well, it is so filled with wonderful information, and you have a new approach to teaching things through your webcast called Psychic Sit-Ups.
You know, Marla, the Psychic Sit-Ups was an inspiration that came to me about a year ago, where I really thought, how can I best empower others to develop a very strong confidence in their intuition and in their psychic abilities? And I reflected on how I did it. I worked with my
Charlie,
teachers once a week.
Well, and you coming from a third-generation psychic family, you also had teachers in the physical form that you worked with, like Charlie, right?
Exactly. And I had appointments to actually work on my psychic muscles.
Right. Now, that's very well documented in your book, The Psychic Diary.
Right, The Diary of a Psychic.
Diary of a Psychic. So you are offering all of us an opportunity to have a real personal relationship with you as you guide and teach.
Exactly. And to train your attention by having the weekly lessons, to really put your attention on your intuitive channels, to work those muscles, to develop and build upon them, and to note your results. It's just like building your physical muscles.
Right. Well,
and people have noticed that until they committed to the sit-ups, it was a desire they had, but not a real strength that they would ever be able to develop. So I really feel excited about the sit-ups being a fabulous tool for people anywhere and to work at a time that works for you.
Well, and I hope you're going to have people who have, made how can I say this without making my tongue twist, but a six-sensory six-pack of muscles.
I know, that's what I say. Isn't that fun? It builds your psychic six-pack.
I love that. Well, I'm really excited about that, but your whole website is just filled with so much wonderful information. You have an array of books. There's 10, right?
Actually, 14 now.
Really? You're such a busy girl.
I love teaching.
Oh, well, I know you do, and you're so, so good at it. You've made it your mission to teach that our sixth sense should be our first.
Right.
Well,
I think we come in with it as our first sense, and we're dumbed down.
Yeah, we sure are.
I think we're actually psychically amputated by the time we get to school for the most part.
And who should we blame about that?
Well, it's actually not a who. It's a social consciousness called patriarchy that is fast, happily giving way, which was the consciousness of letting your power be controlled by others outside of you.
Right.
Versus following your inner voice. And that consciousness now is happily shifting, so it's a whole cultural shift.
Well, that is something that I, too, am feeling more dedicated to. It's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater about the organized religion, but it is putting into perspective what men or the patriarchal society has tried to control us with, right?
Well, I actually think, and it really is not just men, I think women can also be very patriarchal, but the whole idea is centered on an externalized authority. The Father God is out there, the head of the family, the head of the job, the head of the country. It all look to that exterior guide, that exterior leader, when in fact every spiritual teacher, including Christ, said the kingdom of heaven is within.
Correct.
So the consciousness that's shifting is that we are realizing, because this external projection of power is crumbling,
yes,
thank goodness, that we really can be personally guided.
Well, and the personal responsibility, I think, is so key. You know, we had, I'm going to get political for a second, but we had a father figure in George W. Bush that basically, you know, our country is so young. We sort of needed somebody to come in and kick the you-know-what out of people and say, well, I'm going to take care of this and I'm going to take care of that. And part of our society wants to get behind that, but we now see the error of our ways, and now we're kind of looking for a savior. What do you think about that?
Well, what I'm seeing and what I like is that what's going on in our country politically is actually just another reflection of what's going on in the world consciousness, which is the fall of patriarchy and the failings of patriarchy, the limitations. It doesn't work anymore because the root of patriarchy is that everything is outside and it's me against you.
Right.
But we are in it with the internet and with the dependencies of global economy and with the dependencies we have on each other in terms of sharing resources. We can no longer have a dominant force bullying or oppressing the lesser forces.
Right.
So what we're learning, and it's in our politics, but it's also in our medicine, and it's in our education, it's even in our creativity and our art, is that we have to move toward a more cooperative integrity with ourselves and with one another. And that's what your psychic sense does, is it informs you more accurately about what's going on in the world.
Well, that's what I think is so crucial in what I try to imbue with people is the idea that you have to trust your knowing. I ask people when I sit with them, tell me something that you know so well that I can't shake that from you. Like, oh, I know I love my kids or I love my dog. That knowingness is what I am sure through your, not only the website, but your books and all of your teaching, you try to make certain that people pay attention to this.
Well, I have just a teeny little imagery, which is, you know, you could have all your five senses working, in other words, let me rephrase it. If you have none of your five senses working, but you have this inner knowing, you're going to be okay. Right. But if all your five senses are working and this inner sense is not working, you won't be okay. And my great model for that is Helen Keller.
Oh, perfect.
And it's the sense that leads you to living an authentic life.
Mm-hmm.
It's the sense that leads you to empowering and creative relationships.
Right.
It's the sense that informs you when it comes to your health, whether or not you're in good hands or you're on the right track. It's the sense that clues you into your safety and protection. It's the sense that also gives you direction toward creativity.
And, well, this is the job of a healthy parent as well as a healthy facilitator and therapist to make sure that you are okay no matter where you are.
Right. And that's why I like to say a real teacher sets the student free.
Right.
By giving you the tools.
Right.
To do that. And real teachers are teachers who help empower you rather than create dependency.
Absolutely.
So that's what I've devoted all of my work to, and that's what I've devoted all of my teaching to my whole life. I've had 38 years now going on.
Right. You basically,
pretty young.
Yeah, you basically started when you were like 5, right?
Well, I started when I was 12, so you can do the math on that.
Yeah, you can.
I grew up always being intuitive, but I don't feel that makes me special. My absolute conviction and through observation is every child starts out intuitive. Every human being starts out intuitive, and it's the social influencing and the consciousness and the environment that will either accelerate or amputate our sixth sense. It'll either give it strength or it'll cut it off.
Accelerate or amputate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about this. We're going to take a break and come back with Sonia Choquette.
Visit Marla Frees' website, www.marlafrees.com. That's MARLAFREES.com to learn more about her great work and how you can benefit from her skills.
This is Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. We go deeper.
The Dreamland Festival is coming up in Nashville, June 27th through the 29th, and Jim Marrs is going to be doing something quite incredible there. He will be introducing his new book, The Fourth Reich, probably his most important and powerful, eye-opening book since JFK, The Fourth Reich. Don't miss hearing about it from Jim Marrs personally at the Dreamland Festival. Plus, I'll be there. Ann Strieber will be there. Linda Moulton Howe will be there. William Henry will be there. All of your Dreamland hosts presenting on all sorts of topics around the subject of extreme strangeness. Ascend to the Dreamland Festival. Go to the unknowncountry.com store, click on the latest, and it's the first item in the list. Get your place at the Dreamland Festival right now. Subscribers input coupon code DF1 as you check out of the unknowncountry.com store and get $25 off your Dreamland Festival tickets. Good for each ticket, not the whole order, each individual ticket in the order. Linda Howe this week, very simply, one of the most incredible UFO witness interviews ever recorded. It will stun you. Don't miss it. Last segment of the show.
Welcome back. This is Marla Frees for Dreamland, and I have with me today psychic Sonia Choquette, and she is a master teacher, and she is here on this earth. She's a great gift from Spirit to teach us all how to use our intuitive self. So, Sonia, what do you think about how we can train our children, well, after we've, of course, trained ourselves, how do we keep our children in this knowing that they come in with?
Well, that's a good question, and one that's so good I wrote a book on it. It's called The Intuitive Spark.
Wow.
Nurturing intuition in your child, your family, and you.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I think it's such a good question is that intuition really is incubated and grown or amputated, annihilated in the family first and foremost.
Right.
So the first thing you can do for your children is demonstrate a healthy connection to your own intuition. And here's the really important thing. treat it as normal.
Mm-hmm.
Treat it as absolutely your gut, your vibes, your inner sense is something we all have and should listen to most of all. And then another thing that I think is really healthy for families to do, with parents to do with kids, and I mean as early as they can speak, is to ask kids, what are your vibes? What does your spirit say?
Yeah, what is this telling you? Right.
Right. So, like, for example, I have now an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old daughter who are extremely articulate and comfortable with their inner guidance.
Oh, how wonderful.
But my whole life, they would come and say, Mom, can I spend the night with a friend? Or, Mom, I want to do this. And I'd say, well, before I give you my impressions and opinion, what does your spirit say? Will this be good for you? Is there anything about it that's making you uncomfortable? Is there anything about it that you feel you can gain? And I would keep looping it back to them to self-examine before I would come in and give an answer. And my husband did the same. So pretty soon they got to the point, I'd say by the time most kids just spiral out of control and lose their minds in middle school, they were very clearly already comfortably saying, my vibes don't agree with that.
Right.
So I can't do it, instead of trying to do something that went against the grain of their authentic self.
Well, and that's just so important. And the listeners who have children, you know, it's such an amazing gift to be given a child, to sign up for having a soul come onto this earth and training it and keeping it safe and helping it. But that soul is a soul unto its own.
Exactly.
And you know, as parents, I mean, look, I had parents that grew up. We grew up in the 50s, 60s, and had an imposition of their opinions, of course, to mold me. And as a child, it was terrifying having what I had as abilities or foresight, and no one wanting to listen to me, and being punished for that.
Absolutely, and I have to tell you that's still sadly prevalent. So it brings me to the next most important point. When your kids have a vibe, when your kids share an intuitive experience, don't laugh it off, or dumb it down, or dismiss it, or ignore it. Give it importance and respect. Right.
Well, that's what they need more than anything, and that's what's happening with these young kids. If the parents are not there on the same page, supporting and listening and giving respect to the way these children feel, that's where the child gets lost.
And that's why children, I actually write in there, I had a parent say, well, why is my son doing drugs? He's just checking out. And I said, because he's seen you check out.
Right.
He's just following the example. You've just checked out in different ways. You've checked out by being your head always in an iPod or always in a computer, rather, or your BlackBerry, or you've checked out into the television, or you've checked out, but you've not been present and real with your child.
Well,
and it's not like you have to do it all the time. 10-minute check-in.
Right.
Is all, how do you feel? What's up? What's going on with your spirit? Is a very good question to start introducing to your children when they're really, really young.
Well, hopefully the parent is conscious enough and clear enough and devoid of
their own biases.
Yes, medicating themselves, etc.
So the way I've written the Intuitive Spark, the first, it's into 3 sections, and section 1 is all about the parent.
Right.
I think kids are just fine. The whole book is about how to mess up a good thing.
Well, you know what? The one thing that is great about our television system right now is that we have the opportunity, and of course, women who are raising children that might be home, they have the opportunity to, instead of watching a soap opera, tune into someone like Oprah or Dr. Phil.
Or go, to the YouTube now and see really inspiring conversations and art and interviews with people.
Absolutely. And last week, Oprah had on Dr. Brian Weiss.
He's a wonderful friend of mine.
Yes, I love Brian. Isn't he great?
He's very funny.
And I was so thrilled to see that this conversation of past life regressions was in the mainstream with Oprah.
Right. I think that we have to recognize we're in what I call a paradigm shift. We really are beginning, the collective consciousness is now beginning to feel and sense and want to pursue a sixth sensory, intuitive realm of consciousness and realm of operation that integrates and takes into consideration that we can communicate intuitively, that there are spirit guides, that there are past lives, that we are so much more than the matrix we've been shoved into.
Right. And some of these things, of course, are being proven scientifically.
Well, the thing is, when you have, I'll even take an example from my own publishing company, which is Hay House. When you have 150 million books on spirituality, intuition, past life regression being sold annually, there is a huge point of reference where the collective, greater good of the collective people are saying, well, whether science gets this or not, it's happening to me.
You said 150 million?
A year.
Wow.
A year. So there is a whole swath of society saying, yeah, this is real, and it's too big to ignore.
Well, I think the thing from my experience in working with people is that they are, of course, they're frightened that their lives don't look the way they want their lives to look. And they get anxious because they do not have that sense of knowing that they can trust. They, as you said, consistently reach to the outside. And you have had quite an experience with having a physical teacher going to see Charlie, once a week, or how many times a week did you see him?
I went once a week for years.
And then, of course, your indoctrination with the guides that were not physical.
Right.
And you know what, Sonia? I got to tell you, I think that that's the most courageous thing that you have done. And you have explained it through your work in a very practical way that I think people might be confused or afraid of doing it for themselves, finding those guides. The Judeo-Christian paradigm that we've been taught of maybe that's wrong, or what is this, or I hear from someone named Astra, who is this?
Right, and I think that when I wrote my book, Ask Your Guides, I just wanted to give a guided tour of the spirit realm and let people know. It's sort of like, in my perspective, was like when you go to a car mechanic with your first car. Like, this is all new to me.
Right.
But so I will feel far more confident in making good decisions if I know a little more information and a little bit more education about what I need to know. So Ask Your Guides introduces people to the spirit world and lets people know that it is just as varied as the peopled world. Mm-hmm. And that there are realms of consciousness that are so specific and different. Just as that we have different cultures, different languages, people who have different types of talents and gifts, so too in the spirit world.
Yeah.
And personally, I grew up Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. And I believed in the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church said we had saints and angels. And that we would pray for intercession from our dearly departed. So in my mind, growing up, I was given total permission and license to have dialogue with the spirit world.
And your family supported that.
It was to the point that we would set a seat at the table for whoever was visiting from the spirit world.
I love that.
We had a place at the dinner table. We had an altar. We had a perpetual candle burning. It was, and it seems weird to the Western world, but to more indigenous societies and more societies that are still connected to the natural world, they do this too.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
So it's just that our Western consciousness in getting so far into the logic brain has really disconnected from the mysterious and the mystical side of life.
Well, and the distractions that we have.
Well, that's for sure.
So many distractions.
So I tried to write a book with Ask Your Guides that would, first of all, let people know what's out there, how to connect, why to connect, when to connect, how to know when a connection is happening, what's a good connect, what's not a so good connect, and how to be in charge of your connections rather than having spirits intrude upon you.
Well, I love the idea of having that kind of manual. And wasn't your first book, The Psychic Pathway, similar
yes,
to that?
And that was also, and still is, my best-selling book. And it is a manual on how to understand and refine your psychic skills.
Well, I can't tell you how many gifts I've given those at Christmas time.
Well, I'm grateful. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. But you know what it's doing for me? It's keeping me from writing my own book.
Well, and that's, I think, the next step for you is to write your own book, because this is such unexplored territory still.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I feel, and why you should write your book and why we should have these conversations, is because it has been kept so in the closet and so down and so, it's bad, and science this and that. And my feeling is, if enough of us talk about this, then pretty soon the conversation shifts to, don't deny this, and until you can prove it isn't real, be quiet.
Well,
it is real. Too many people are having this experience to ignore it any longer.
Exactly.
So that's why you need to add your hat to the ring.
Well, and we're going to talk more about that, because you've got a book that's coming out called The Time Has Come to Accept Your Intuitive Gifts.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break, and we'll talk more about that.
Well, this, I feel, is the call to action book. It is the one to say, that time you're waiting for your life to happen and all the ducks to fall in a row, and for you to feel empowered, and for your relationships to heal, and your love interests to work out. All of that is available right now, but only through one way.
And that way
is to accept your intuitive gifts and let them be your guide, because your intuitive gifts will guide you to all those things you're waiting for.
Well, this is a sweet book. It's not a large one. It's sort of I would like to call it a pocket-sized book filled with wisdom.
Well, the reason I made it this way is because I wanted, first of all, it's compilation of not only my own encouragements, but it is the affirmations of all the people that we have traditionally revered throughout history, from scientists to poets to philosophers to doctors to teachers to artists, people who have been hugely and enormously successful. And it is also, I've included their affirmation that the way they got there.
And about trusting their intuition.
Was the way that they got there.
Right.
So this is a book that for those who I feel are doubting Thomases and don't want to be weird and don't want to take a risk and are worried about what people think and is this real, I say open this book to any page and you will be met with wisdom from people who have been there, tried and true, and have succeeded, who are telling you this is the way I did it.
Right. Right. Well, I have it right here in my hands.
And it's the book of permission.
Oh, I love that. A book of permission. And one of my favorite sayings that you write is, when you know, and let that be enough.
That actually is my favorite saying of all my sayings. That's very psychic of you to pull that one out.
Well, I love it.
Isn't that the most empowering statement?
Well, that's a really hard thing to admit. Because if you trust your inner knowing, and I work as a psychic medium, but if you're not even working in this realm, you are intuitive. You do know things.
Absolutely.
This is the deal. That's what you're teaching.
That's what I'm teaching, that is the ultimate choice of personal empowerment. When you know, you know. Let that be enough.
Enough. And constantly we are being challenged. Constantly. You'll read the news. The things that you intuitively know inside of you, go, you know what, that just doesn't feel right.
Right, and that's enough.
Yeah, that's enough.
You know who's an example to me and why I am so strongly committed to that consciousness is my own mother, who was a victim in World War II of the Holocaust, lost her family, lost her hearing, lost her country, lost everything when she was 12 years old, and was constantly being told by the people she was surrounded by who were panicked and tormented and scared, you're going to die. Oh. And she said, my spirit said I wasn't. Oh. And I had a choice. I could either listen to what was coming at me or listen to what was coming from me. And she said it was probably survival on a colossal level, but I chose what was coming from within me.
Right.
And it not only saved my life, but she met my dad. They're married now 62 years.
Oh, how wonderful.
You know, her life is a testimonial to it, so I'm not just pulling it out of the ethers.
Right.
I've seen the example.
Well, and when you teach this through your workbooks and people start making a list of their confirmations, they will prove to themselves that the knowing that they feel, and if they write it down and it comes to pass, they'll start getting evidence. And,
exactly. You know how quickly? In 1 week.
Yeah.
So here's my 4-step process to turning your intuition on.
Oh, good.
Step number 1, be open to it. That alone is a radical shift for most people. Just be open to that you're intuitive. Just accept that idea. And step number 2, expect to be intuitive. Mm-hmm. And that's another radical idea. But I say to people, 2 people go to downtown Chicago where I live. One expects a parking space and one doesn't. They're both right. So when you expect, you attract.
Yeah.
Now, step number 3 is trust your vibes. Trust what you get. And what I do, this is where step 3 comes into what we were talking about. Every time you get a gut feeling, an aha, a hunch, an inkling, a vibe, a sense, and I wonder, write it down. Mm-hmm. Don't argue, don't negotiate, don't justify, don't try to figure it out. Just put it out there. And what you will have in 1 week is evidence. Now, having said that, Marla, and having worked as long as I have, most people still won't do this.
Yeah.
So here's plan B. If you don't write it down, okay. You should, because you would enjoy it.
Right. Yeah,
but
you would enjoy
plan
it.
B is at least speak it out.
People like to be right.
Right. So if you name it, you claim it. So at least speak it out.
Well,
so if you're driving in the car, just say, well, what do my vibes say? Mm-hmm. And then answer the question. When you're in doubt, what do my vibes say? What does my gut say? What does my intuition say? What does my psychic sense? You could even call it frank.
Yes, call it whatever you want.
But just give it a voice. And you know what? If you name it, you claim it. And most people are intuitive, but because they never claim it and they never say so, they never acknowledge it, they are what I call members of the woulda, coulda, shoulda club.
I love that. That's
and
great.
It's so frustrating. It's like I felt that. I knew it. Rats, I should have.
Yeah.
And you can correct that quickly.
Sure, yeah.
And then your 4th step in this practice, in this dance, is act on it.
Well, it's so cute on your webcast where you basically walk through your house, and this is all about shopping because, hey, I'm a spirit shopper. When I was getting my wedding together, I basically said, okay, look, I need a place. They said, drive down here, pull over, get out and look. And that's what I did, and that's how I found the place for the ceremony. And on the way home, I said, okay, now I need a dress. And they said, okay, pull over to the side of the road. There's going to be a store on your left-hand side. The second dress you try on is it. And keep saying 1,500 in your head. And I walked in there. The dress was like $25. There was no way that I could afford it. And the woman said to me, come back in 2 weeks. It'll be $1,500.
I love it. See?
And here you're talking about shopping. I mean, I try and encourage people to do this all the time. I trust that if you need a pink sweater, you can go to Macy's and your spirit will lead you there.
Exactly. Because that's the point of the spirit world and your higher self. It wants you to have a delightful experience.
It wants to have a relationship with you.
And that's why I say name your spirit. Because your
Right.
spirit is that intuitive voice coming in. So name your spirit and then you can begin a relationship.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about something that you used years ago, and I'm sure you still do. And I have been interested in making sure that our listeners, through various other interviews that I've done, pay attention to it. And we'll be right back to talk to Sonia Choquette.
This is Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. We go deeper.
The Dreamland Festival is coming up in Nashville, June 27th through the 29th, and Jim Mars is going to be doing something quite incredible there. He will be introducing his new book, The Fourth Reich, probably his most important and powerful, eye-opening book since JFK, The Fourth Reich. Don't miss hearing about it from Jim Mars personally at the Dreamland Festival. Plus, I'll be there. Ann Strieber will be there. Linda Moulton Howe will be there. William Henry will be there. All of your Dreamland hosts presenting on all sorts of topics around the subject of extreme strangeness. Ascend to the Dreamland Festival. Go to the unknowncountry.com store, click on the latest, and it's the first item in the list. Get your place at the Dreamland Festival right now. Visit Marla Frees' website, www.marlafrees.com. That's MARLAFREES.com to learn more about her great work and how you can benefit from her skills.
Welcome back to Dreamland. Sonia, you are a big proponent of psychometry.
Yes.
I remember when I was working with you years ago, even by phone, you would have me send you a key that I had been carrying. And you read people by working sometimes with metal. Is that correct?
I've done that for years. I can still do it. I don't particularly rely on it anymore, but I think it's a terrific way to get used to connecting to a vibration in a solid way.
I think that it is something that people can practice every single day of their life.
Absolutely. And you know why? Your hands, first of all, they have chakra openings in them, so right in the palms of your hands, and all you have to do is rub them together and then pull them apart, and you can feel that frequency resonating between your hands. Mm-hmm. And your hands are connected to your heart, which is where your intuition originates. It's centered there. So you can, and I write about this in my book, The Psychic Pathway, as well as my book, Trust Your Vibe, where you can hold something and get a feeling for it. And it's fun. You can have your kids do it I had my kids doing psychometry when they were 2.
Yes, and they could probably hold bills and tell you how much the bill was saying.
That was our game, and to this day is our game. Now that my daughters are older and both working, we play the game of we get the check and we won't open it, and we feel it. Whoever can guess the numbers, that's the one that gets treated to dinner.
I love that.
It's just so fun.
It is. It's so great. Even if it's 723, you hope it's 723, but it might be 327.
And it still counts.
Right.
You know, and the way to play the game is don't go for perfection. Go for energy and vibration.
That's interesting.
You know, so you want to just really get the essence. For example, I was teaching psychometry in a class that I was giving at Omega Institute up in New York, which is a wonderful place.
Yes, and you're going to be there.
Actually, I am going to be there again this August. But a woman was doing psychometry with this other woman, and she took her keys and she said, all I get is jelly beans. All I get is jelly beans. And I think I'm wrong. And I said, well, she came up frustrated to me. And I said, well, did you tell the woman that you were reading? She goes, I was embarrassed. I just don't want to sound stupid. And I said, well, that's the thing. You can't censor what you get. It's just like you're being given it's like being the FTD florist. They give you the flowers, you deliver them. You don't get to say, I like these flowers or don't like these flowers.
Right, yeah.
So she went, okay, well, I'm going to go back, but I feel really stupid. Well, she said, all I get is jelly beans. And the woman said, oh, my gosh, I can't believe it. My question was, should I get a new puppy? And there's a litter that was born on the farm next door, and the puppy they offered me, they've tentatively named Jelly Beans.
Oh.
So that's just an example of how it works. It doesn't work necessarily the way your logic brain works.
No.
The intuitive brain works in a whole different language, in a whole different way. So say whatever you get, because even though it might make sense to you right away, it will make sense eventually.
Or in the pictures. You see pictures, too.
Or exactly. Mm-hmm. Or smell scent.
Mm-hmm. Scent, pictures, words.
And, you know, the spirit world is very, very playful and likes to speak in metaphor and rhyme.
In metaphor.
And so I had a client who was going to work one day. She was a flight attendant, and she got in her car at 4 a.m. to go to the airport. And she hears from her inner guide, it's a good day for donuts. And she thinks, what is a good day for donuts? I'll get one at the airport.
It's always a good day for donuts.
And so she hears this 2 or 3 more times as she's driving to get on just as she's getting on the highway, there's a gas station, kind of a 24-hour, and a donut truck pulls in. And it's, the morning delivery. And it says, it's a good day for donuts. And she said, well, fine, I'll get a donut, but I might be late for work. So she pulls in behind the donut truck, and just as she pulls in, she looks down and she notices for the first time that her car is completely out of gas. And had she got on the highway, this was in Kansas City, she was out in the country, that she would have been like 50 miles from or 30 miles from the next station.
Right.
And would have run out of gas and missed her flight. So immediately she sees that, and again she hears, it's a good day for donuts.
Isn't that great?
So that's just another example of, I think playfully, you have to learn spirit speak.
Well, and the idea that, we try and make sense out of these things is we just have to sort of give it up.
Right. I say, you know what, just look at it like you're looking at something window shopping. Just say it, and it won't necessarily make sense right away, but if you just name it.
Well, you can't change anything that you're not aware of.
Right.
So if you pay attention and have awareness that you're thinking this way, you will start to build a bridge to this consciousness, and more information and more information and more information will come.
And it's so fun how it comes. It's very entertaining. Another guy was saying that he was trying to use his guidance and working with my Ask Your Guides book, and he wanted a girlfriend, and all he got was meatloaf. And he thought, I don't want a meatloaf for a girlfriend, and he was just fighting it left and right. Well, he went about 10 days later, he went down the street at lunchtime from his office, and he sat down, and a really cute girl was his server, and she said, today our specialty is meatloaf.
Ooh.
And he looked at her, and she was really cute, and he said, do you want to go out with me?
Mm-hmm.
And they started going out together. He got a girlfriend.
Well, I think that Spirit is so smart. I sat with a woman once, and I heard Spirit say, you need a boyfriend like Steve. She's had problems with boyfriends. And the other women in the room said, who's Steve? Who's Steve? And the girl said, I can't believe this. She said, I've had a boyfriend, sort of an imaginary boyfriend all my life, and I've called him Steve.
Oh, I love that.
And Spirit knew this. Nobody else in the room did, but we loved it. So Spirit was basically saying, all the qualities that I have that you want, you can find in the physical form.
Yes. But and the point we're making together is Spirit is fun.
Yeah.
Being intuitive is, a lot of people have because of Hollywood and all the drama of Hollywood, they have a feeling it's all scary and blood curdling, and there's nothing about that is true.
Well, it's interesting. You have had the opportunity, I know this about you, to step into that world of Hollywood, and you have avoided it.
I didn't want to go there because it was manipulative, and it wasn't in integrity, and it didn't support my mission. So I turned it down several times.
Right.
Instead, I just made the psychic sit-ups and put them on my website because that's what I really wanted to do.
Well, and I'm telling you, that's why I speak about you as powerfully as I do. And I know a lot of those famous people out there. And yes, you do, in my opinion, have the most integrity of any of the well-known psychics out there.
Well,
and
I appreciate that, Marla. I really do work with integrity, and I need to always be able to look in the mirror and stand in front of God, and I say, if today was my last day, I want to feel good about it.
Well, you certainly are a gift from Spirit. You are powerful and loving and a source for our soul growth. And I thank you so much for sharing you and what you know and what you've experienced. And your website has a list of the things that are coming up, of course. We just missed you in Washington, D.C., correct?
Yes, I was there last week. I'm off to London tomorrow.
How wonderful.
And I have a calendar. I think that I'll be back probably, I think my next event is Omega.
Oh, good, in Rhinebeck.
Yes.
But
do look at the calendar, and I also have a radio show myself every week on Wednesdays.
Good.
So they can find all about that. It's Hay House Radio.
Well, this has just been so delightful. I'm just so blessed. I think that we are put in the path of teachers who we resonate with, and You know, I'm telling you, the day I left your house, I was not the same person from that point on.
All I saw was what was true, which is that you are a fabulous healer, teacher, and guide. And I'd just like to end my part of this conversation by saying I will very much look forward to reading your book.
Thank you, Sonia. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Linda Moulton Howe and I have talked you to death about drones, but you ain't heard nothing yet. These things are real, and we are beginning to learn more and more about them because Linda keeps getting more and more people coming forward and telling their stories, their astonishing stories. And that's going to happen in just a few moments. Linda Moulton Howe's fabulous website, earthfiles.com, is the place to go to find the very latest on the edge of science. Get the real facts. Linda Moulton Howe won an Emmy for a reason. She is the best there is at what she does. So let's welcome Linda Moulton Howe, Dreamland and UnknownCountry.com's absolutely unique, world-class science reporter. Here she is from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Thank you, Whitley. And recently I have received more emails after I put out requests to earthfiles.com, Dreamland, and Coast to Coast AM viewers and listeners who might have more information about the highly strange dragonfly-shaped and moving drones. And recently, I received one that is perhaps one of the most amazing reports from somebody who is in law enforcement that I have ever received in my career. And this particular email is dated May 30th, 2008. Quote, I just heard your piece about dragonfly probes, and you talked about people sitting on their stories, about contacts and encounters, for fear of being ridiculed and chastised for their comments. Well, that's what I have been doing for about 7 years. In 2001, I was on my parents' land in southern Ohio, about an hour north of Cincinnati. It was early morning, about 8:30 a.m. in mid-December 2001. I had been out hunting on my parents' land, where there were a lot of Douglas fir trees that ran about a half mile and about 300 yards deep. The deer I was hunting frequented that stand of fir trees, so I routinely went to sit among the trees every hunting season. When I entered the stand of trees to head to my normal spot, I felt a strange sensation, like a static charge enveloped my body, unquote. That Ohio hunter has asked for anonymity because he now works in law enforcement and does not want to jeopardize his employment. So I will call him David Smith. David was born in 1982 and is now 26 years old. The past 4 years he has worked as a police dispatcher in a southwestern state. He told me that he is haunted by what happened to him in that southern Ohio stand of fir trees in December 2001. He vividly remembers a ring with 3 long antennae suspended in the air at treetop height. It had snowed the night before, and apparently the strange aerial ring was interested in that new snow. A perfect circle had been melted on the ground that included melting snow on fir tree branches that hung inside the circle. The snow droplets were rising in a translucent column of energy into the completely silent, hovering aerial ring with its 3 long appendages.
I walked probably 10 or 15 feet into the tree line, and I heard this sound. It's very hard to explain, but it would start from the lowest bass that the human ear can pick up, and it would rise 4 or 5, maybe even 6 octaves to a very high-pitched note, and it would do it every 15 seconds. So it would rise from bass to high pitch, and then back down to bass, and it would start the process over again. This was not natural. This was not an animal. It was not man-made. I need to find out what this is. So I started walking in the general direction that I figured it would be. And I remember that the sound never changed. The sound stayed the same volume that it was when I first heard it. Like it was the same distance away from me even though I was walking closer. I remember looking ahead of me and seeing a tree that the snow on top of it was partially melted. It was wet snow. And the tree directly after it, the snow was a little bit more melted. It wasn't gone, but it was still kind of there. It was very wet. And then I remember the tree after it was hardly hardly any snow at all. It was mainly on the bottom needles, and then I remember vividly the tree after it was devoid of snow and completely dry. This was the case for all of the trees that I could see in front of me on both sides of the row. I would assume it would carry forth to all the trees in a circle. I remember this being incredibly puzzling. As I walked forward to inspect the trees, I put my head down below the limb line, and I remember looking under the trees and seeing that there was a perfect circle cut in the snow, as though someone had taken a knife and just cut out a perfect circle of snow, and all that lay there was grass. So I proceeded to walk forward, and when I raised my head up between the limbs, I saw something that is very, very hard for me to explain. I saw what I assumed was the snow from this missing circle in the ground. It was floating, droplet form. It was animated. I could see movement in the droplets. I do recall seeing some sunlight played on the droplets. As I looked up the column that stretched, I would say, 5 to 8 feet up from the ground, I noticed that it got heavier as I went up. So very few droplets at the bottom. At the top of the column, there were millions of droplets, very full. And 10 feet above that, for the first time, saw the object. The sound had stopped, almost like it realized someone was there and looking at it. I just remember that the sound did stop as I walked in through the trees. After looking up past the column, seeing the object for the first time, it was very awe-inspiring at first. Very much like that small feeling you get when looking at large buildings. That was the feeling I got, was, wow, I'm incredibly puny compared to this thing. Not that it was large, because it wasn't. I would estimate the diameter of the inner ring of the object to be maybe 10, maybe 12 feet wide. There were 3 antennas. I call them antennas, but they were very thick. The ring diameter was probably foot thick to 2 feet thick. The antenna that I saw, there were 3 of them. They were equidistant apart. They were probably 20 feet long. They were huge. Where the antenna actually met the ring, I couldn't tell any sort of coupling. I couldn't tell any sort of anchoring system. It looked like they were molded into the piece, and it all made one piece. There was absolutely no crack where they were anchored. There were no bolts, no obvious anchoring mechanisms, but they were incredibly taut. They were 100% straight. There was no bow to them.
Where were they coming off of the ring? Were they together, or were they equidistant around the ring?
They were equidistant around the ring.
Can you place in a north, south, east, west on the ring where each of these 3 20-foot-long antennae were?
I would have been pointing west. So those antennae on that ring, one would have been pointed exactly due north, and then the other 2, I would guess, were going to be pointed southwest and southeast.
And were they tapering to the very end and tip of each of those antennae?
They tapered. They came to the points. They were so small and so pointy that it actually blended in with the background. To where it came to a point, I couldn't actually see the point. The material, I assume it was metal, this thing was constructed out of, was nothing I've ever seen before. It was 100% smooth and very deep, as in when you would look at it, it was like it absorbed light. It was almost as though it sucked in light around itself. But it was a charcoal gray, very, very shiny, and I saw no reflections. It was shiny yet matte, if that makes any sense. I saw no reflections in it. I couldn't see myself or the surrounding trees. On the ends of the antennas, there were 4 rods that looked like FM radio antennas.
You're saying that crossing each of those ends were straight pieces of rods that made 90-degree angles to the long antenna?
Not 90, they probably made 35-degree angles. They were pointed semi-diagonally upwards. I would guess a good 3 minutes had passed, with no movement, no sound. The only thing that I can still recall vividly from this point on is that the droplets had stopped moving. They were still floating in space above this area. They are very large trees. These things are huge. And the limbs extend, they only leave a good 1.5 to 2 feet worth of clearance walking between them. So it's a big deal for that much snow to be gone.
How tall are those trees?
The object was hovering right above one, like it was almost touching one of the tips of the trees. I would say it was probably 20 to 25 feet off the ground. Those trees are about 20 to 25 feet tall.
And you are how tall?
I'm 6'4".
So the object itself was only about 14 feet above you.
Exactly. I got a very, very good look at it. The good thing is that nothing was obscured by the trees themselves. So I could see the whole ring. I could see all the antenna arrayed around its body. I vividly remember that when I would try to look at it, it would instantly, within a second or two of me looking at it directly, there would be a field around the ring that would appear that looked like heat waves. When I would first look at it, it would be just a ring. This field would just automatically appear, and it would just be waves, like heat waves coming off a hot road in the desert. The next thing I remember is looking at it and staring at the ring itself, trying to get some sort of characteristics from it, some sort of writing or inscription or anything where there was a metal panel or something, and I just couldn't find one. I remember intently thinking to myself, what is this thing? I've got to find out what this is. And as soon as I did that, I was overcome with the most frightening fear I've ever had in my life. The most horrifying fear that you could ever imagine hit me very hard. So much so that my body tensed. I tensed up so tight that I couldn't move. It was like I'd lost control of my body. My brain was in fight or flight mode, and it was telling me to flee very quickly, but I couldn't. I was stuck in place, and this lasted for, I would say, 15 to 20 seconds. I don't know what happened to the water, the floating droplets of water. I do not know. I was very intent on the ring itself. I couldn't look away to tell what had happened to it. The next thing that I can recall happening is that as the fear progressed, as it got worse, I actually started to cry. I remember the warmth of my tears on my cold cheeks. And the last thing of the whole encounter that I really remember is the fact that it went from no movement, no sound, no nothing, instantly to spinning. It was amazingly fast how fast this thing was going. Spinning right in place in a circle. There was no wind generated from it. It was spinning incredibly fast. As I was looking at the ring and it's spinning, I remember seeing a white pinpoint of light developing right in the center of the ring, right where I was looking. Not in the center space, but in the center of the body of the ring. So if I was looking at the body of the ring itself spinning, right in the middle of that body developed this pinpoint of brilliant white light. As I stared at it, it got larger and larger, and then in an instant it exploded and it just enveloped my eyesight. I relate it to like reverse tunnel vision. When you have tunnel vision, everything goes from the outside in. Well, this went from the inside out and enveloped my vision. When it exploded into my sight, it knocked me unconscious. I woke up, I would guess, 10 hours later. The sun was down. It was night. My watch had stopped, so I can't give you an accurate time. I still have the stopwatch. I was laying on the ground on my back, and I remember feeling very disoriented when I woke up, almost to the point of not remembering what happened. The weirdest thing about it was that the soles of my boots had been melted. The rubber on the soles of the boots, it was melted. There was grass in it. It was horrible. There were 2 footprints in the snow where my feet had been, and in those footprints, there was no snow. There was just grass underneath where I'd been standing. Obviously, the melting of the boot soles would burn me through the snow into the grass, but there were no burn marks in the ground. It was almost like I'd been struck by lightning. I felt very disoriented. My body hurt all over. I couldn't think very well. I was lost, actually. I couldn't figure out where I was. I sat there for half an hour, 45 minutes, just trying to figure out who I was, where I was, and what I was doing. It was very, very frightening.
Did you get any sense of communication in your mind from this object when it was spinning and when that light began to appear?
The only thing I felt when it started spinning was just pure hatred. I got this overwhelming feeling of, I hate you. Like, why are you here? Like, leave me alone. Why are you alive? That kind of thing. I come from a military family, and I've seen a lot of military hardware that performs very well, but I've never seen any piece of metallic hardware perform that kind of a maneuver in our atmosphere.
Spinning so rapidly and not causing any movement in the air around you.
Or any sound. Try to imagine seeing a ring spinning, right, in air with the antennas attached, but absolutely no air movement. Absolutely no sound from air movement. No whoosh, no ka-whoosh, nothing. Just complete silence.
And was it during that spinning that you had this sense that it was directing hatred at you?
When it started spinning like that, I genuinely believe it wanted my death.
And if it were that powerful, and from someplace else in the universe perhaps, why do you think you were not killed?
I don't think it had the capability. Using everything that I know to be valid in the world of physics and the world of chemistry as we know it, I don't think it had the capability to do it.
But that it was expressing to your mind somehow that it wanted you eliminated.
Exactly. I feel that it was expressing its emotions, if I dare use the word emotion. I don't know where it was from, of course. I definitely do not believe that it was man-made. There's a lot of stuff out there I know that can be man-made, but this was not. This was completely otherworldly, and I do not believe that it had the capability to kill me. What it was doing was expressing its desire to do so.
And when that white, bright pinpoint of light began to expand, did you have any other sense coming from the spinning object?
It was almost as though I was in a trance. My vision had been locked upon it. I do remember thinking I'm going to die. I remember thinking that this is it. I'm toast. Like, I'm done. I believe it tried to kill me and it failed somehow. It didn't perform something right or do something correctly. Or it was just a defensive tactic. Or it was an object that was sent here. What I got from looking at it, from stumbling upon it in the middle of nowhere, was that it was on some sort of covert operation. My main objective is to not be discovered. That's what I get from the whole situation, is that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I stumbled upon the wrong thing at the wrong time.
And you could say from what you observed that its mission at that time was to gather the snow in a melted form into that energy column and take it somewhere into that ring?
Yes. I thoroughly believe that it was studying something, whether it be the snow or whether the snow was just the top layer and it was trying to get to the dirt. Maybe there's something buried under there. I don't know. I've never gone back. I refuse to go back. I will not go back into that area. That's how frightening this was. I'm scared thinking about it right now.
And when you heard my discussion and heard Brent Yarrow up in Camas, Washington, describing what he and his friend had seen, what was your reaction?
To tell you the truth, and I'm not afraid to admit this, I broke down crying. I was very glad to hear that I wasn't the only one that had heard about this stuff. I wasn't the only one that had seen one of these things. I'm very, very scared of it coming back. I feel that its purpose was not good in nature. Something big is going to happen. I'm fairly certain of that.
David Smith is now the 16th eyewitness spanning 21 years who have described a long wingless body around a ring with these antennae, sometimes 3, sometimes more, in these odd positions around the ring. And in 2007, in addition to the ring and the antenna, it was very clear that a series of photographs also showed this corona of wires that went up from the ring, which were not in this 2001 mid-December description by David Smith. But of all of them that have seen this strange dragonfly moving and wingless body in the sky that I have talked to personally, every single one has said, I felt like I was being watched. I felt that it knew what I was thinking. I felt like I was under surveillance. Whatever this is, Whitley, the very fact that this man 7 years ago would also have intuitively the sense of an emotion that he related to hatred and a desire to kill him watching it is perhaps the most sobering and most dangerous insight that we've had yet on these dragonfly drones.
Charitable giving is important not only to the needy, but also to those of us doing the giving. That's why Unknown Country and Dreamland have adopted the Mercy Corps as a favorite charity. As large as Mercy Corps is, it's still a very lean operation, so 89% of your contribution goes directly into the hands of the needy. When children are hungry, Mercy Corps is there. When people are freezing or flooded out or suffering from disease, Mercy Corps is there. You can be there too. Go to mercycorps.org to get started.
Linda, I think that is the most incredible, powerful, single interview about a UFO sighting that I have ever heard. I don't recall, in all of my career, ever hearing anyone speak that with that articulation, with that sincerity, with that skill in terms of observation of detail. and self-knowledge about one of these events. And I will tell you that certain things about what he said, and I'll be very specific. We're fortunate. We have a little time today. We have about 15 minutes to go.
Okay.
10 or 15 minutes. So I don't know exactly how many because I'm not good enough with numbers. But anyway, the emotions that he experienced are so familiar. I became aware of the fact that the visitors could project fear while I was actually, when I would get close to them out in the woods, sometimes I would know it. Not because I had seen them or could see them, but because they gave themselves away by my suddenly becoming completely suffused with the most appalling fear I can imagine. And then I would know they were nearby. And I would, and that they were afraid I was aware of their presence. And I also knew another thing, that they could not tell whether or not I knew they were there, which was fascinating and very informative. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given themselves away, right?
And it sounds like the zones of fear that John Keel wrote about in his very important books from the 1960s, such as The Haunted Planet.
Absolutely. But the other thing, and the thing that makes this so remarkable, is the hate that he felt. I have felt that too, once or twice. And at the same time, I felt also that I was in the wrong place and that something hated me, or in my case, something I could see quite clearly, hated me for being there. And I thought afterwards, when it happened to me, that perhaps that hatred came from the fact that this being was going to suffer consequences because it had stumbled and revealed itself when that was not something it should have done. And that was where the hatred came from. But I agree with him wholeheartedly. There's a sense that something is about to happen here. That when I say about, I don't mean tomorrow, but I do mean something like this. Say 1 million years ago, some extraordinary advanced species sent scouts out, not necessarily living beings, but creatures so advanced biomechanically that they might as well be living beings, extraordinarily advanced machines, and sent thousands of them, millions of them out across the universe or just across the galaxy. And some of these machines found us. They might have sent signals back, but it might be quite a long time before the main body arrives. Because if they don't travel if they can't move instantaneously, and they're not somehow from another near dimension that's right on top of us, maybe they're crossing the universe or crossing the galaxy much more slowly, much faster than we can imagine, but far more slowly than we would assume. And maybe what we're seeing now is gradually coming into more and more focus because more and more of them are arriving. And the drones, to me, represent a sea change. These are the clearest, biggest, most clearly definable alien objects that we've seen. And to say that they are of human manufacture is also, therefore, to say that there is an element of human society that is capable of functioning and manufacturing things that are literally light years beyond the technology that's known in the public sector. And while I know the technology behind the curtain of classification is some of it profoundly advanced, I think he's right about this not being of this world.
I was just going to say, he's not describing something that was made by man, just as Ricky Sorrells was not describing anything made by man that was so huge over his forest in Texas, in Dublin in January, where he had gone deer hunting and found that thing above him. And when I asked David Smith about what he intuited perhaps could be the reason about this translucent cone, you and I know it as being a beam technology. I know people in our government know of this advanced beam technology that is used to raise and lower things from this planet into craft. And
yeah, I got raised and lowered by it once, so I do know it exists.
Right, and Jim Sparks and others. But when I asked him specifically about this extraordinary scene of something melting newly fallen snow into droplets and gathering it up into the cylinder that was rising up into the ring with its antenna, this is something that David Smith said. This is a quote. Well, you know, one of the staples of modern warfare is reconnaissance. You have to know your enemy. You have to know how they think, how they move, how they work, what they eat, how they eat, when they eat. I believe these ring drones are the tendrils of some sort of recon force, an expeditionary unit that's going over the target, figuring out what has to be done. That's what frightens me so much. That is the vibe, the feeling that I felt, unquote. Now, very important to remember, he was knocked unconscious. His boots were melted onto the ground, but he was alive. It did not kill him. Perhaps these machines cannot kill life that they encounter. Maybe there is some sort of restriction. And further, he went from that experience into a desire to go into law enforcement. And today, as he talked to me about this memory that haunts him, he is doing so from a context of dispatching and being on the receiving ends of all kinds of calls all of the time. And he told me that he was even aware that in the police station lingo, there is a code. It is for unidentified flying objects. That code was released to his police station and others in January when all of those sightings were occurring in Stephenville, Texas. He said something extraordinary happened, Linda, and we're talking about highly classified and emergency code operations and alphabet soup people being involved. But given all of that and given the fact that now in his work he is paying attention to what is happening with an open mind, he and others in police stations, he said, we are truly left out of the information loop. If the code comes into the police station, that code is immediately passed to higher authorities, and they have a step-by-step operation in which very specific information is to go beyond police stations to some phone numbers that, as far as you and I are concerned, they would be part of the alphabet soup agencies in this country. And I think it's fascinating that here is a young man who had an experience that has so stunned him that when he finally decided he would go into law enforcement, that he now is more aware and has more of an open mind and is trying to understand not only what happened to him, but what is happening in all of these other aerial light sightings that have been engulfing the planet for a long time, and especially now this new resurgence in 2008, not just Texas and other parts of the United States, but definitely an uptick from around the world.
You know, I don't think that it intended to kill him, and I doubt very much that it didn't have the ability to do that. I do think this man was sent back with a message. And the message is basically very clear. You better watch out. Don't tread on me. I am not going to tolerate you doing anything that I don't care for you to do. He was sent back, and it was with a message, and that message is quite clear. And that message tells us something. It tells us that whatever is there is doing or is planning to do something that we will not want, that we will wish to resist, and it is warning us, don't try us on. It's a threat reaction. Exactly what you're seeing is something is threatening us and telling us to stay away. Now, if it couldn't be bested by us in some way, it wouldn't need to threaten us, and that tells us something else. In some way that it knows, and perhaps we don't, it's vulnerable to us. Mm-hmm. We have to think very clearly with this stuff, because If you don't, it'll get you. But so we know that whatever is out there has vulnerabilities, that there may come a time that it is essential for us to understand. And what I think is so sad about the secrecy, which on one level I can certainly understand their thinking and the necessity, what they would view as the necessity of it, but at the same time, it means that people like him and other good, competent thinking people like you and me, people who can think a lot about this and think quite clearly about it, don't really have a chance to add to the human side of the equation. And one of the cleverest things the visitors have done by the way they have presented themselves to us is to put our government in the situation where it's more or less compelled to keep its own counsel as long as it can. On the one hand, this means that the kind of social disruptions that the government fears won't happen. On the other hand, the longer they wait, the more likely it becomes that the visitors will be able to use them just in the way they are hoping, and that is to use them as a means of surprising us, or to enable the visitors to surprise us, because the government kept its secrets for too long.
Right, and he told me that one of the reasons that he finally decided to contact me is that I had said in one of my appeals on radio and at Earth Files that I truly do believe that knowledge gives us strength and that ignorance weakens us, and we can be broadsided so much more easily when we are not prepared with knowledge. And he said that is exactly what I feel, and that's why I wanted finally to tell you the story. He has never really unfolded the story that you have heard except to his father.
Well, it's a great benefit that it has been unfolded to us now, because, it's time, especially among the people who listen to this program and to Coast. It's not a large number of people. I mean, by world standards, it's a big audience, but it's tiny by the number compared to the number of people on the planet. But maybe it's time to start rolling out some real knowledge in hopes of being able to devise a real defense that isn't only hardware-based, but also extends into the social fabric and into the cultural milieu of mankind, so that when this does emerge, it won't be so shocking to us that it basically renders us helpless immediately. Maybe we'll have some sort of a chance if at least some of us are expecting and understand what parameters are here.
Right. And I feel that all of my work as an investigative reporter and TV documentary filmmaker has been with that goal, to try to enlarge human thinking so that we're not so shocked, that we're not getting down on our knees to lights in the sky, but we are standing up and saying we're a life form and we have as much right to be here as anything else, and that it's time we got past we're alone in the universe. That is so old and outdated, and maybe that each of these stories that you and I and others keep spreading to the public, that they do add up over time, like water dripping to create a stalactite, and maybe the governments are looking to Mars and Phoenix to be the headline opener. Oh, we have found evidence of life in another world, therefore we're not alone in the universe.
Linda, let's hope so. Thank you very much.
I love that. Well, I'm really excited about that, but your whole website is just filled with so much wonderful information. You have an array of books. There's 10, right?
Actually, 14 now.
Really? You're such a busy girl.
I love teaching.
Oh, well, I know you do, and you're so good at it. You've made it your mission to teach that our sixth sense should be our first.
Right.
Well,
I think we come in with it as our first sense, and we're dumbed down.
Yeah, we sure are.
I think we're actually psychically amputated by the time we get to school for the most part.
And who should we blame about that?
Well, it's actually not a who. It's a social consciousness called patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
that is fast, happily giving way, which was the consciousness of letting your power be controlled by others outside of you.
Right.
Versus following your inner voice. And that consciousness now is happily shifting, so it's a whole cultural shift.
Well, that is something that I, too, am feeling more dedicated to. It's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater about the organized religion, but it is putting into perspective what men or the patriarchal society has tried to control us with, right?
Well, I actually think, and it really is not just men, I think women can also be very...
Welcome to Dreamland. This is Marla Fries, and part of my job as a host for this program is to introduce people who I've researched in the psychic spiritual world, who not only have stunning talents, but who radiate tremendous integrity. My guest today vibrates with sincerity and compassion in a way that no other well-known psychic does, in my opinion. She's world-renowned as an author, vibrational healer, and sixth sensory spiritual teacher. The wisdom in her many books and CDs are the tools that I recommend to my clients and to any of the listeners seeking psychic development and assistance. She's the psychic who I actually credit as putting me on my path in my own development some 25 years ago. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Sonia Choquette.
Well, thank you, Marla. It's such a pleasure to be able to talk with you and see all the wonderful things that are being accomplished as a result of our first encounter.
I know. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is.
When I sat in your living room, this was back in the early 80s, I was stunned by what you were able to tell me about my life. You talked about where I was going. You mentioned the city. You told me what would happen to me, which I would be brought to critical acclaim and then torn down, which it did happen. And I thought that when I left your house, I was not the same person. And I wasn't. It was as though you flipped a light switch on for me.
Well, that is my goal when I read for people, and I really like that you are able to articulate that, because what I attempt to achieve when I work with people is not to just convey information, but to change your vibration.
Right. Well, you did that with me, and because of what you and I did together and the door that you opened up, I feel that you really are the one who taught me how to change vibrational frequencies in other people, and I trust that is what I do for my clients, and I'm deeply grateful to you.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I always say I like to teach the teachers.
Well, that's basically, I just went on your website, which is just stunning. By the way, let's give our listeners what your website is right now.
It's very easy to remember. It's Trust Your Vibes, VIBES, www.trustyourvibes.com.
Well, it is so filled with wonderful information, and you have a new approach to teaching things through your webcast called Psychic Sit-Ups.
You know, Marla, the Psychic Sit-Ups was an inspiration that came to me about a year ago, where I really thought, how can I best empower others to develop a very strong confidence in their intuition and in their psychic abilities? And I reflected on how I did it. I worked with my teachers once a week. Patriarchal, but the whole idea is centered on an externalized authority. The Father God is out there, the head of the family, the head of the job, the head of the country. It all looked to that exterior guide, that exterior leader, when in fact every spiritual teacher, including Christ, said the kingdom of heaven is within.
Correct.
So the consciousness that's shifting is that we are realizing, because this external projection of power is crumbling,
yes,
thank goodness, that we really can be personally guided.
Well, and the personal responsibility, I think, is so key. You know, we had, I'm going to get political for a second, but we had a father figure in George W. Bush that basically, you know, our country is so young. We sort of needed somebody to come in and kick the you-know-what out of people and say, well, I'm going to take care of this and I'm going to take care of that. And part of our society wants to get behind that, but we now see the error of our ways, and now we're kind of looking for a savior. What do you think about that?
Well, what I'm seeing and what I like is that what's going on in our country politically is actually just another reflection of what's going on in the world consciousness, which is the fall of patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And the failings of patriarchy, the limitations. It doesn't work anymore because
and you coming from a third-generation psychic family, you also had teachers in the physical form that you worked with, like Charlie, right?
Exactly, and I had appointments to actually work on my psychic muscles.
Right. Now that's very well documented in your book, The Psychic Diary.
Right, The Diary of a Psychic.
Diary of a Psychic. So you are offering all of us an opportunity to have a real personal relationship with you as you guide and teach.
Exactly, and to train your attention by having the weekly lessons, to really put your attention on your intuitive channels, to work those muscles, to develop and build upon them, and to note your results. It's just like building your physical muscles.
Right. Well,
and people have noticed that until they committed to the sit-ups, it was a desire they had, but not a real strength that they would ever be able to develop. So
right.
I really feel excited about the sit-ups being a fabulous tool for people anywhere and to work at a time that works for you.
Well, and I hope you're going to have people who have, made how can I say this without making my tongue twist, but a sensory six-pack of muscles.
I know, that's what I say. Isn't that fun? It builds your psychic